Hey guys, guess what? In this episode, I'm be making my season preview of the Carolina Hurricanes. Welcome back for another episode. And yeah, just me, Sam Wallace. And yeah, in this episode, like you heard my one liner, I'll be presenting my official season preview of the Hurricanes in this episode. As you guys all know, if you've been keeping up with the podcast, the last couple weeks have been about NHL standing predictions and analyzing the Metropolitan Division. And in this episode, it's going to be me talking about the Hurricanes this upcoming season. And it's going to be a lot more than just looking at the roster. So I hope you guys enjoy it. And first things first is I have a great partnership with SeatGeek. You get $20 off of your first purchase if you use promo code Caniac Reports, all one word. Is a great deal to try and get some money off of tickets that you're trying to buy. And another thing too, I have a couple more things in terms of podcast stuff. Is I have released for those who are listening on Apple the Caniac Report Plus. So if you do not feel like listening to ads at all, you can subscribe to that for a free trial for a week. And it is a great way if you, I would say it's a great option if you really do not like ads at all. And another thing too is that there is a survey out. So you can find it in the YouTube description if you're watching me on YouTube, and if you are listening on Apple, Spotify, or whatever, you can find it in the description of the episode. But if you could just fill out that survey, that would be very, very helpful. I am giving you guys first who actually listen to the episode first dibs when it comes to filling out the survey. So that's just a few things on the podcast. And also remember, if you are watching on YouTube, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode. And if you are listening on wherever you get your podcasts, please leave a rating and a review and subscribe so you never miss another episode. It really, really helps me out. So, a few things that I want to talk about, kind of light since in terms of news coverage since our last episode, but there are a few things I do want to discuss. One of them is apparently Rasmus Dahlin. If you remember, he was the first overall pick in 2018, right ahead of Andrei Svechnikov. Well, it was announced since our last episode that apparently his fiancee Carolina needed a heart transplant. And when I heard that, my prayers and thoughts are with him and his fiance. I am hoping for a speedy recovery of Carolina. So I really, really hope she gets to be better and be fully 100%. I really hate hearing that on pretty much anybody that they needed a heart transplant. Just terrible. So thoughts and prayers are with Darlene and Carolina and all those who are affected by that, even their families too. Another thing too is that Anze Kopitar announced his retirement. And if you guys do not know who Anze Kopitar is, he has basically been one of the big faces of the LA Kings. He is one of the best two-way centers in the game. Very, very good player. And congrats on your retirement, man. And I mean, he really was a great player. Really, really was. And I hope post hockey treats him well. Really, really do. And the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to NHL news is Jack Roslovic, former Hurricane. Apparently, the rumor is that he is seeking a multi-year deal. Now, when I saw that, I was like, you know what? That makes sense. Because if you guys remember, we only signed him to a 1 year contract last year. And obviously, I'm sure Rosvic's like, you know what? I want to settle down. It really, really does make sense. And honestly, I will admit, I'm a bit shocked that he is still a free agent. I would have thought a team would have given him a pretty good contract based on what he had did last season. Obviously, he had a hot start with us. Did it die off? Yes, but he still got over 20 goals with us. So I'm just a little bit surprised just to see he's still out there, but I understand why he's seeking a multi-year deal. I hope he ends up with the team that he wants to be with, obviously. Now, the thing with Jack Roslovic is that the door is not completely closed when it comes to him returning here. With that being said, though, I think it's very unlikely that he does come back here just because you look at this roster, this current roster team, like there are more players than there are roster spots, which is good. It shows that we have good depth, but when you sign a guy like Jack Roslovic again, it just makes you questions what are the repercussions of that if we do sign him. I think that's what all of us fans are wondering. If we sign Roslovic, someone's out, right? Someone has to be out, right? Because and I'm not talking about like out being like a healthy scratch, but being like traded. Because like you have so many players. And we'll just see how Jack Roslovic treats that multi-year deal if he does get one. I do think he does, just because again, I thought he had a decent season last year, and I would say in the playoffs, I thought he looked pretty decent. So we'll see what happens with Jack Roslovic. And now I'm going to be discussing the Hurricanes. And first thing I want to start is with this episode releasing on a Monday. That means tonight is the start of preseason hockey. And I am very, very excited. It means hockey has pretty much officially arrived. Now, I know there are probably some fans that are like, well, it's just preseason. Yes, it is just preseason, but at least you get to watch hockey, especially if you're going to the game. And our first game is going to be against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I expect to see most of our prospects playing that game. I expect probably mostly prospects playing in the first maybe two games. Probably. That's my guess. Now, I could also see Brenda Moore thinking, again, thinking, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I could also see Brenda Moore looking at these preseason games and be like, you know what, this could also be a good way to see how Stankoven plays at second line center. So I could see these preseason games have a lot of appearances with Stankoven as a second line center, and it makes sense because you know how Brindamore is with the is players playing center. There's a huge, huge responsibility that comes with that. So going to be very, very interesting. And yeah, it's preseason. I would expect with me, probably, again, this is just me, but I will be at the Tampa game. And after that game, regardless if we win or not, I'm probably like, okay, I want regular season to be here. Because, I mean, you look at the amount of preseason games, and I've always been a proponent of this. There should not be 6 preseason games, in my opinion. There just shouldn't. And there isn't going to be after the season, it's going to be reduced to 4 preseason games. I still think that's maybe a little bit too long. I'd probably do like 2 or 3 preseason games. But regardless, preseason time, if you're a hardcore Hurricanes fan like me, you can be like, okay, I want to get to the real stuff, especially after watching maybe one or at the most probably 2 preseason games, because ultimately those games just do not matter. And the another thing too, obviously with preseason kicking off tonight, training camp is obviously continuing. And a few things that I do want to talk about when it comes to training camp is you have Jacob Slavin, who is off the ice. And I know there might be some Canes fans that are concerned about the whole Jacob Slavin thing. From I think what Brendan Moore has said about Jacob Slavin is that it's not something that's a big issue, and he should be back to playing on the ice probably come the home opener. That's I think from what I heard. I could be wrong, but honestly, if Slavin misses all preseason games, I'm fine with that because he is that vital. And I like how they're treating. Really like how Brendan Moore and the coaching staff are treating these minor, very minor injuries. If there's like a nick or something, or if the players do not feel 100%, let's say they feel 99%, they're not going to be playing because Brendan Moore's like, listen, I am concerned about your health. I need you to be 100%. And honestly, I love that coming from a coach like Rod Brindamore. And another thing, too, with slaving off the ice, there are a couple players that are playing in a no contact yellow jersey during training camp. That's Keontae Miller and Jankowski. I can't remember what's going on with them, if that was announced, but the fact is that they're not 100% obviously, but they're still playing. So hopefully, whatever is dealing with Miller and Jankowski in terms of a nick or an injury, hopefully they can come back 100%, which I think they will come home opener. From what I heard, nothing has been urgent when it comes to any of these players. So that's the biggest thing. And I think that's great. Another thing, too, I mentioned this in the last episode because it was revealed that Hurricanes were definitely interested in Michael McLeod. And I do want to close with this, and then that's going to be it with me talking about Michael McLeod, Hockey Canada trial, and everything. And I do want to say one thing. You're allowed to have your own opinion when it comes to Michael McLeod and the whole Hockey Canada trial and stuff. You are definitely allowed. I have my own opinion. I ain't going to say it, but I will say one thing. Regardless of the situation, I do think from a moral compass situation, I don't think those players should have done that. I will say that. But regardless, I think everybody is entitled to their own opinion when it comes to what they got from the Hockey Canada trial court case. And now I ain't going to say it anymore. Anymore. Done. Again, I just do not. I letting my opinion, my political opinion out there and all that stuff, because I do know this does revolve around politics and all that type of stuff, and I just want to steer clear of that and just focus on what this podcast is about, and that's reporting and talking about the Carolina Hurricanes. So the next thing too that I want to talk about, I found this interesting. An article was released on the Hurricanes website about Stankoven and the second line center position. And apparently, I found this very interesting, even though I knew it was going to happen. I think it's not really surprising. Logan Stankoven and Brind'Amour actually talked about that second line center position opportunity at the end of last year's exit meeting. So you knew Brind'Amour, basically just from that statement, Brind'Amour was hoping Stankoven could solve that second line center issue. And you know what? I hope he does. I really hope Stankoven solves it, because if he doesn't solve it and he needs to be on the wing, then the Hurricanes definitely need to address that. I realize that no one is selling a second line center in this league. I realize that. But at the same time, you're talking to a general manager who was able to pull off a Mikko Rantanen trade. This guy has guts, and I admire that. So my basic thing is, yes, obviously you want a player that can fit into Brind'Amour's system, but if you're willing to make a big trade like the Mikko Rantanen trade that you did last season, then you should be able to at least pull something like a second line center off. I realize the situation Hurricanes are in. I realize the situation most of these teams in the league are in when it comes to second line center issues. But regardless, if you can pull off a trade like that, I just don't want to hear much of an excuse. That's all. I know that might sound harsh, but Toski really was able to pull off a big trade like that. And I just admire that guy's guts, even though it did not turn out the way we expected it at all. So that's kind of it for Hurricane stuff. And now I'm going to get to doing my season preview of the Carolina Hurricanes here. But before I do, I'm going to get to a sponsor. Football is back, and so is your shot at big wins with DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Your game day instincts can score you real money fast. Here's the play. Just pick more or less on two or more player stats, from breakout rookies to elite quarterbacks, and unlock the upside every snap brings. The better your calls, the bigger your payout. And here's the kickoff bonus. New DraftKings customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. This season, play your players' instincts. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN. Play just $5, get $50 in Pick 6 bonus picks. Make the call, ride the upside. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Okay, so first I'm going to look at the DNA of the Hurricanes here. I'm going to be mentioning quite a bit of players. It's kind of like the same formula, just a bit deeper, like I did with analyzing the Metropolitan Division. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the forwards. Now, I brought up the top 6 forwards and points, and this is just point production top 6 forwards. And the first player that obviously led this team in points, if you just look at this team and the additions, I did add in the additions like Ehlers, like Keandre Miller. Sebastian Aho still leads his team in terms of points. In 79 games, he had 29 goals, 45 assists, 74 points. The only thing I ask of Aho is to up his offensive production. He can be better than that. I know he can. 74 points isn't bad per se. I'm not saying that's bad. That's really good, to be honest. I think getting around 70 something points or higher classifies you as a first line type of player. But with Aho, we know the offense can be better. We know he can be an 80, 90 point player because we've seen it before in the past. So the next player is Seth Jarvis. In 73 games played, he had 32 goals, 35 assists for 67 points. And to me, Seth Jarvis is a guy. Of all these players, now there's one I think that can, even though it's a little bit more out there instead of Jarvis, I think that's probably the right word, is I really think Seth Jarvis is the closest thing we have to possibly hitting that 40 goal mark. He is such a gifted goal scorer. He has great creativity. He has such tenacity when playing on the ice. And I cannot wait to see him play again, obviously, with this team. I just hope he can be able to hit that 40 goal mark because I think he really, really has that potential in him. The next player is a player that we added, Nikolai Ehlers. Look at his time with Winnipeg. He had 69 games, 24 goals, 39 assists, 63 points. Now, with Ehlers, to me, when I look at not only this past season, but his whole career, I would say the biggest issue I probably have with Ehlers is staying healthy. It's not in terms of getting points. He can get the points. And hopefully he can, being under Rod Brind'Amour and all. But with that being said, you look at his career, like 2 seasons ago, he was able to play 82 games, meaning not this past season, but the season after that. But if you look at throughout his whole career, that is one of only, I think, 2 seasons where he was able to play all 82 games. Most of them have been around 60 games that he's played with. So the key thing, I think, with Ehlers is staying healthy. The biggest thing. The next thing, and I already have an episode talking about him. So again, not going to delve too much. If you want to hear me talk about an in-depth episode on this player, there is an episode from the month of August of me talking about this player, and that is Andrei Svechnikov. In 72 games, 20 goals, 28 assists, 48 points. I'll just give you the Cliff Notes version of kind of what I said in that episode that I'll say here, in the fact that he had a pretty much not a good regular season, but in the playoffs, he came out great. He came out as one of the best players. So I think out of all these players, the player that I'm most intrigued about is Svechnikov. Can he get back to playing what he was like in the playoffs last year? That is the biggest thing with Svech. The next player, and I'm really happy we have a player like this guy because, again, you look at our forwards. There's not a lot of players like him, and that's Taylor Hall. And the reason why I say that is because this is a guy who's a veteran. He's been around the league for a long time. I mean, you can probably say the same thing maybe with Aho, maybe, but Taylor Hall is a lot older than him. He's, I think, 33 years old. He was a top pick at one point from New Jersey back in, I believe, 2012 draft. It was the motto back in that draft of Taylor Hall or Tyler Seguin. That was kind of the big thing of who's going to be drafted first. But Taylor Hall in 77 games, 18 goals, 24 assists, 42 points. I cannot wait to see him in a full season with Carolina because obviously we got him in January this past season in that huge Mikko Rantanen trade. And Taylor Hall, I'm telling you, he's been playing great. I've really loved Taylor Hall. Did he dry off probably a little bit toward the end of the season and maybe toward the end of the playoffs as we got eliminated? Maybe. But regardless, Taylor Hall, he's a player that I think is kind of needed, to be honest. I don't think we've had a player kind of like him. And again, I'm not trying to make a comparison here, but we haven't had a veteran player like him since, I would say, Justin Williams that can play in your top six. I love Jordan Staal, but I would not classify Jordan Staal to be in the same position as Justin Williams just because he's always been playing in that one position right next to Jordan Martinook, Nino Niederreiter at one point, and William Carrier, obviously, Seth Jarvis. We know how fans feel about Jarvis playing on that line, but I would not classify Jordan Staal to be in that type of group. Justin Williams and Taylor Hall, I think, are more identical in the fact that they can play with the top players. Again, not trying to just destroy Jordan Staal's performance here. It's just he's not in that position as the likes of Justin Williams and Taylor Hall. That's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here. The next thing is, and I would say he's probably my favorite player after Netch's left, Logan Stankoven. In 78 games, 14 goals, 24 assists, 38 points. Not bad for a rookie in his first season here. I think Svechnikov, if you remember his rookie season, he got around the same amount of points as well. Even though that might not be a good comparison, considering how Svechnikov has turned out to be. But Stankoven, kind of like with Taylor Hall, and to some extent Ehlers, I can't wait to see a full season with Stankoven in a Hurricanes jersey. I think out of all the players, he's the player that could probably reach 60 to 70 points. I think he is that gifted. So that kind of makes up the top six forwards in terms of points. And what's amazing is even though Jackson Blake didn't make it, he was right below Stankoven in terms of points. So we are loaded with very, very good forwards. The only thing is, can Stankoven be that second line center? That is the biggest question heading into this season. So what's funny when it comes to our defensemen, because that's what I'm going to go through next. And I was initially going to be like, okay, who are our top four defensemen? The only thing is that you can probably look at all these defensemen and be like, these are top four defensemen. So instead of doing top four defensemen or just looking at them, I just put all of our defensemen out there. And that's great. It shows how deep and good this defensive core is for the Hurricanes. So the first player, again, I'm going by points here. The player that got us the most points last season, Shane Gostisbehere, 70 games, 7 goals, 38 assists, 45 points. Keandre Miller, 74 games, 7 goals, 20 assists, 27 points. He's an addition. Can't wait to see what he does. Again, like I have said probably before with Keandre Miller, I am cautiously optimistic. The next player, Jacob Slavin. You guys know how I feel about him. Even though I think Stankoven's my favorite forward, I think Slavin, to me, all the players on this team, he's my favorite player. Slavin, in 80 games, he got 6 goals, 21 assists, 27 points. So the same point production as Keandre Miller. Jalen Chatfield, 79 games, 7 goals, 11 assists, 18 points. Then you have Alexander Nikishkin, who is a rookie, obviously. He played in the playoffs. He didn't play in a regular season game. But you look at this defense score. One thing that actually kind of pointed out in my mind when I saw these stats, I'm like, last season, I mean, yeah, Gosses Bear was our main guy in terms of getting the points on the back end. But you look at this upcoming season, you have Shane Gosses Bear. Alexander Nikishin could probably be up there with Ghost in terms of points. And not to mention, a couple seasons ago, Keandre Miller had around 40 something points. So just looking at this season, if every player plays up to their potential, obviously, this could be a good group of defensemen that could score lots of points. Like, I just listed 3 defensemen that could probably have a decent chance of hitting over 30 points. And if we do have 3 defensemen that hit over 30 points, that's really good. Really, really good. So I think the offense is going to be a lot more dangerous on the back end for this team heading into this season compared to last season, which is just great. We need all the offense we can get. Now, our goaltending. This is probably the area where you talk to any Hurricanes fan of. Probably the biggest concern. So I'll get to it. Pyotr Kochetkov in 47 games, 27 wins, 16 losses, and 898 save percentage. He is a player that hasn't really hit that potential that we know he can hit. Like, you look at last season or heading into last season, that was one of the expectations was can Kochetkov hit that next step and be more of a consistent, great goalie. And you look at last season as a whole, when it comes to his performance, we kind of getting the same thing, like we have been his entire career. There are games where he's great, there are games where he's terrible, and it's frustrating. So we just don't know what Kochetkov we're going to get, which is really, really frustrating. So with Kochetkov, it's a performance issue. With Anderson, it's not a performance issue, it's a health issue. And in 22 games, 13 wins, 8 losses, and 899 save percentage. Honestly, I think that's percentage of Anderson is probably just a little bit overblown considering what he was able to do in the playoffs. Like, you look at the playoff games leading up before the Panther series. So I'm talking about the New Jersey series, the Washington series. Anderson was considered probably the best goalie in the playoffs. He was a stone wall. And the biggest thing with Anderson is can he stay healthy? Because he can be fantastic. We saw it in the playoffs. Now, a couple seasons ago, was he a little bit loose with covering the post? Yes, he was, especially in that Ranger series. But regardless, Anderson has proven he can be a top 10 goalie. He just needs to stay healthy. So Kochetkov, it's a performance issue. For Anderson, it is a health issue. And that's why I think lots of Canes fans have concerns when we look at that goalie tandem right there. So now the next thing I want to talk about is the depth. And obviously, there are players that I will mention here when you look at probably was classified as, I would say, probably our bottom 6 players. Because again, I looked at the top 6 players in terms of forwards. Obviously, Jackson Blake, even though I think you can classify him as a top 6 player because of how good he is. You have KK, Eric Robinson. Eric Robinson, I think, is fantastic. You have William Carrier, who's a great defensive player that plays so well, so incredibly well with Jordan Marnock and Jordan Stahl. And those 2 players, we know what they can give. Marnock and Stahl are probably the 2 hardest working players on this team. So again, I think you look at just the bottom 6, very, very good. And now when I want to talk to you guys about the depth here, is basically the pecking order of whenever our roster players get hurt. So I've separated this from forwards to defensemen to goalies. And when I saw this, I thought it was a little bit interesting, especially with one section, and that's in terms of our defensemen here, in terms of depth. Because the thing is, in order to win a Stanley Cup, you have to have lots of depth because there are probably going to be injuries. This season, 82 games, there are going to be injuries. So this is kind of the pecking order that I have of which player will play first in case one of our roster players, our starting players, gets hurt. So on the forward side of things, let's say Aho gets hurt. I think the first player that will come in, and again, not saying that he's going to fill Aho's void because Aho is a very important player, but the first player that's going to play in the absence of Aho, I think is going to be Mark Jankowski, and I think mostly Hurricane fans will agree with that. Jankowski, when we got him, he was scoring goals off the wazoo. Do I expect that to continue to this season? Heck no. But I think Jankowski has proven he can be a very, very good forward. And what's really nice about Jankowski is that he's very, very big. Also, another forward. Let's say you have two forward players out that are injured or hurt. Then obviously you have Jankowski playing, and I think the next forward that you would have to play is Tyson Jost. I'm completely fine with that too because Tyson Jost, I thought he started out probably just a little bit rough, but the more games I thought Tyson Jost played, he continued to actually be very, very good. So that's another player that is serviceable and I think is a very good depth player just to cover the injuries that you have up front in terms of your forward group. And I would say the last player here, again, we have not signed Michael McLeod or whoever. I'm just going over the players that are actually signed. Juha Jaska, I think, is the third player if we have like 3 injuries up front in our forward group. And when I look at the depth, again, when it comes to our forward group, I think that's actually pretty good. If you can have 3 depth players that can a little bit cover for the injuries that you have up front, I think that's actually pretty, pretty good. So Jankowski, then Jost, then Jaska. If it comes down to 3 injuries in a row in terms of the forward group, I think you're decently covered. Again, when you have 3 injuries in your forward group, well, I think you're decently covered. It still might hurt you because of the amount of injuries. But hopefully, with these depth players, they can nullify that void that those players that are out can kind of patch right there. So when it comes to defensemen, this is one area that I actually have a little bit of a concern of. So obviously, in terms of depth defensemen, Mike Riley, who I think is a huge upgrade over the likes of Ty Smith that we saw last season. And you could probably say maybe Scott Morrow. Maybe. He was a rookie. So I don't know if I classify him in that depth position or not. But when it comes to our defensemen, I think Nikishin, Sean Walker, Chatfield, the others, if any of them got hurt, obviously Mike Riley will come in. And you know what? Mike Riley, he's a very good, I think, third pair top 6 defenseman. I really, really do. I think he is much more of an upgrade. And I think we have good insurance there with Mike Riley. Now, let's say there are 2 injuries. So obviously Mike Riley's going to have to fill in. Now we have to put in another defenseman. This is where my concern is. Now, I know some people might be like, oh, they could bring up Charles Alexis Lejolt. They could. The thing is that he doesn't have any NHL experience. And if you look at our defensemen that are in the AHL with Chicago, there's another defenseman out there that has a lot more experience than Charles Alexis Lejolt. And that is Gavin Bayreuther. He played 55 games 2 seasons ago with Columbus. And I know there are probably some fans that would love to see Lejolt play in the NHL amongst the Hurricane group. But here's the thing. I truly think if you're trying to win a Stanley Cup, you got to go with, to me, the more experienced person than the rookie. And the reason why, let's say, okay, So again, this is a hypothetical here. Let's say Keandre Miller is out for an entire month. Obviously, Mike Riley's going to fill his spot. But let's say we have a guy in Sean Walker who's only going to be hurt for like 7 days. Do you really want to send a rookie up just to play 7 games so that you can send him back down? That's my biggest question right there. So I think the one position that I'm a little concerned with in terms of depth is probably our depth on D. Again, I think you look at the roster, it's really, really good. It's just, do we have enough players to cover for those who are probably going to be injured, maybe? Because this is an 82 game season. You have Mike Riley, and then who else? That's my one thing. So the next thing I want to talk about is the goaltending. Obviously, goaltending depth was a huge concern this past season. You had Spencer Martin, who, I mean, he started out good, but eventually, if you look at those two Florida games, Spencer Martin was eaten up by the Florida Panthers. Really, really was. He was not the answer. Dustin Tokarski wasn't the answer. So I will say this. I think with it comes to goaltending depth, if both Kochetkov and Anderson are out, and we know Anderson, he's probably going to be out at some point in the regular season. It's a matter of when, not if. Then you're probably going to be bringing up the first goalie. Obviously, I think all Hurricanes fans would agree is Caden Primo. And great, Caden Primo, he's played quite a good handful of NHL games. So that's good that we're able to snag a guy like him because we are going to need that depth. The next goalie is probably going to be Amir Mitikov, who we got from the KHL. But I can tell you this, that player that we got from the KHL, Mitikov, if he is playing on our NHL team, then this Canes management needs to do something when it comes to goaltending. Listen, I'm not trying to criticize Mitikov. It's just unfair to put him in a situation like that. So if he's one of our two goalies in the NHL, we need to do something, especially if the duration of the injuries are a lot longer than, let's say, maybe a week or 2 weeks. Because to me, that's a big concern. So I wouldn't be surprised if they short up a little bit on the goaltending side, but on the defensive side of things, you have Mike Riley, and that's pretty much it. Again, I'm not trying to just berate Charles Lejolt or Gavin Bayreuther. It's just you look at the gap there between Mike Riley and those two players. It's a pretty big gap. I think I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but that's just how I see it. So that's kind of it for the depth. And now I'm going to look at a few bit of stats here again, kind of like what I did with the Metropolitan teams. Goals for the Hurricanes, 266, which was 10th overall in the league, and goals against 233 goals against, which was 10th in the league also. So we were top 10 for both, which is actually pretty good. I commend the Hurricanes for that. And their record, obviously, last season was 47 wins, 30 losses, 5 losses for 99 points. Again, I think that's a very good record if you look at this team last season because the expectations wasn't there compared to this upcoming season. And you look at the additions, I mean, there's going to be more pressure on this Canes team coming up this season. So, obviously, 82 games, I realize there's going to be a good handful of losses right there. But at the same time, expectations are higher. They really, really are. And a few things that I want to talk about, and then I will end the episode, is I would say the rookie to watch, and I think all Hurricanes players would say this, is Alexander Nikishin, considering he is still technically a rookie. The next category I have here is prospect to watch. Now, this is going to be a hot take of mine, a very, very, very hot take. I know some Canes fans might put Bradley Nadeau as the prospect to watch, but I didn't. I put Dominic Badinka. One is he had a pretty good showcase. And second, I think if you look at just our roster, comparing the forwards to the defensemen to the goalies, I think it's more likely that we see Dominic Badinko, or I would say probably Charles Alexis Lejolt, than we would with a guy like Bradley Nadeau. Because you look at this depth right here, Jankowski, Tyson Jost, Yuha Yaska. It's going to be a lot harder for a prospect like Bradley Nadeau to get in than, let's say, if you're a defenseman, because you basically only have Mike Riley as your seventh defenseman, and that's pretty much it. So the hurdles are less for our prospects or defensemen than for our prospects who are forwards. So you get with me on that? Hopefully you do. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is a fantasy sleeper pick. Obviously, we are sponsored by DraftKings, so I kind of wanted to insert this in. And I think a great fantasy sleeper pick. I really think the best one is going to be Jackson Blake, because not a lot of fans outside our Hurricanes fandom are going to appreciate Jackson Blake like we do. We know how good Jackson Blake is. So I think picking up Jackson Blake, let's say on your fantasy team, I think he's going to bode pretty well. I think he could be very, very good. And the next one, I would say, in terms of a breakout player, I kind of already mentioned this earlier, but I just want to say it again. I think there's a player that's going to break out from like 30 points last season to like 60, 70 points. I do think that's going to be Logan Stankoven, especially with his increased role. So that's going to be fun right there, just to see Logan Stankoven. I hope he can get 60, 70 points. I hope he can solve second line center position. But if he doesn't, that's what I am going to be a little bit concerned about, because if you have KK playing as your second line center, I'm fine with him playing as our fourth line center. I really am fine. But second line center, no, and you're probably not going to win the Stanley Cup. The last thing I want to talk about is, to me, the player that I think is going to get us over the hump, the player that has to perform day in and day out and needs to be big if we're going to win the Stanley Cup. It's not going to be Slavin. It's not going to be Anderson. Not going to be Kochetkov. It's going to be Sebastian Aho. And Sebastian Aho, I thought he kind of turned it up, even though it was a little bit too late there against Florida in that series. He needs to be at that level, game in and game out, especially in the playoffs. So this is a team where I think every fan, regardless if you're a Hurricanes fan or not, where, yeah, they're going to be great probably come regular season time. But the biggest test isn't regular season for this team. The biggest test is the playoffs. Can they win that cup this year? You know, I had a huge expectation. If you guys remember, was it 2 seasons ago when we got Jake Gensel? I was really hoping, because we knew the pain we were going to experience with losing lots of those players like Brett Pesce, like Brady Shea, and we didn't do it. So I'm hoping this is the season. I really, really am hoping this season's the season we can win the cup. But like I've said many times before, I am cautiously optimistic. So I will see you guys in the next episode.